The sun was bright that Thursday afternoon, casting long shadows across Westlake Park as Tanya gathered the scattered toys her son had left around the playground. It had been a good day so far, the kind of ordinary day that most people would forget by dinner time. Her 8-year-old boy was swinging one last time before they headed home, his laughter carrying across the park. 5 more minutes. "Honey, then we need to go," Tanya called out, smiling as she watched him pump his legs to go higher. She checked her watch, almost 3 o'clock. They still had time to stop by the grocery store before heading home to start dinner. The park was quieter than usual today. A couple of other mothers chatted on a bench nearby. An elderly man read his newspaper under a tree, and a few teenagers tossed a frisbee on the open grass. Tanya liked these peaceful weekday afternoons when the park wasn't overcrowded, when she could bring her son here after picking him up early from school on her day off. "Mom, look how high I'm going," her son shouted, his face lit up with excitement. "I see you, baby. Be careful," she called back, zipping up the small backpack filled with snacks, water bottles, and hand sanitizer. Tanya didn't notice the police cruiser that pulled up along the park's edge. She didn't see the 2 officers step out and scan the area, their hands resting casually on their belts. She was too busy waving at her son, thinking about what to cook for dinner, mentally checking off her to-do list for the evening. It wasn't until they were standing right behind her that Tanya realized someone was there. She turned around, startled by their sudden presence. "Excuse me, ma'am," the taller officer said, his voice flat. "We need to speak with you for a moment." Tanya straightened up, adjusting her light jacket. "Of course, officers. Is something wrong?" The second officer, shorter with a crew cut, stepped slightly to the side. "We received a call about a suspicious person in the park matching your description. Can we see some identification?" Tanya's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. This wasn't the first time she'd been questioned for simply existing in a public space. She'd had the talk with her parents when she was younger, and she'd practiced staying calm in these situations. "Suspicious? I've been here with my son for about an hour," she said evenly, reaching slowly for her purse. "My ID is in my wallet." Her son noticed the officers and jumped off the swing, running toward them. Mom! "Who are they?" "Stay back, please," the taller officer said sharply, holding up his hand toward the child. "Ma'am, tell him to stay where he is." Tanya felt her pulse quicken. "Honey, just wait by the swings for a minute. I'll be right there, okay? Everything's fine." The boy stopped, confusion clouding his face. The other parents at the park were starting to notice now. The mothers on the bench whispered to each other, watching. The teenagers had stopped their game. "I have my driver's license right here," Tanya said, carefully pulling out her wallet. Her fingers trembled slightly as she removed the ID card. "I'm just here with my son like I do every Thursday." The shorter officer took her license, studying it with a frown. "This address doesn't match the one in our system." "I moved recently," Tanya explained, keeping her voice steady. "About 6 months ago. I haven't updated my ID yet, but I have mail with my new address in my bag if you need to see it." The officers exchanged looks. The taller one spoke into his radio, while the shorter one continued questioning her. "What's your business in this park today?" Tanya gestured toward her son, who was standing anxiously by the swings, shifting from foot to foot. "I'm here with my child. He's right there. We come here often. You can ask the park attendant, he knows us." More people were watching now. A man had taken out his phone and was holding it up, probably recording. Tanya felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. "The report we received was very specific," the taller officer said after finishing his radio call. "A woman matching your exact description was seen going through bags near the picnic area." "That wasn't me," Tanya said firmly. "I've been by the playground the entire time with my son. Those mothers over there have been sitting on that bench since we arrived. They can tell you I've been here with my child." Her son called out again, his voice smaller now, tinged with fear. "Mom, can we go home now?" "1 minute, sweetie," she called back, trying to keep her voice light and reassuring despite the tension building inside her chest. The officers didn't move toward the other parents to verify her story. Instead, the shorter one handed her ID to his partner. "We're going to need you to come with us to the station to sort this out." Tanya shook her head in disbelief. "To the station? Why? I haven't done anything wrong. My child is here, I can't just leave him." "You can call someone to pick him up," the taller officer said. "But right now, you need to come with us." Tanya felt panic rising. She took a deep breath, remembering all the times her parents had warned her about staying calm, about not giving any reason for escalation. Please, officers. This is clearly a misunderstanding. Can we talk about this right here? My son is getting scared. More people had gathered now. Someone called out from the small crowd. Why are you bothering her? She's with her kid. The officer straightened, suddenly more rigid. The taller one stepped closer to Tanya. Ma'am, we're not asking. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. What? No, you can't be serious, Tanya protested, her composure finally breaking. I'm not going anywhere in handcuffs. Not in front of my child. Please just talk to those women over there. They'll tell you I've been here the whole time. Her son broke into a run, racing toward her with tears streaming down his face. Mom! Mom! Stay back. The shorter officer barked, moving to intercept the child. Don't touch my son, Tanya shouted, stepping forward instinctively. That was all it took. The taller officer grabbed her arm, spinning her around. You're resisting arrest. Turn around now. I'm not resisting anything. This is ridiculous. Tanya's voice cracked as she felt cold metal close around one wrist, then the other. The handcuffs bit into her skin. Please, my son is right there. He's watching this. Her boy was sobbing now, held back by a park attendant who had rushed over from the maintenance shed. The crowd had grown larger, voices raised in protest. Several phones were out, recording the scene. Someone called the mayor's office. A woman shouted from the crowd. You're making a huge mistake, Tanya said, her voice lower now as the officers began walking her toward their patrol car. She could see her son struggling against the park attendant's gentle restraint, his little face contorted in fear and confusion. Mom! Mom! He screamed, the sound tearing through her heart. One of the mothers from the bench rushed over to her son, kneeling down to talk to him. Tanya recognized her. They'd chatted a few times while their children played together. At least he wouldn't be alone with strangers. Please, Tanya said to the officers as they approached the police car. Let me at least tell my son I'll be okay. He's terrified. You can call him from the station, the taller officer replied, his voice emotionless as he opened the back door of the cruiser. Tanya turned her head, trying to make eye contact with her boy one last time before they put her in the car. It's going to be okay, honey. I'll be home soon, I promise. The door closed with a heavy thud. Through the window, Tanya could see her son collapse into heaving sobs in the arms of the park mother. Nearby, a man was gesturing angrily at the officers, his phone still recording. Another woman was on her phone, pacing back and forth, speaking urgently. As the car pulled away from the curb, Tanya stared straight ahead, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Not to her. Not like this. Her husband would fix this as soon as someone reached him. But right now, all she could think about was her son's face, the terror in his eyes as they took her away. The patrol car turned the corner, and the park disappeared from view. Tanya closed her eyes, feeling a tear slide down her cheek. She'd done everything right, stayed calm, been polite, followed instructions. And still, here she was, in handcuffs, being driven away from her terrified child. What she didn't know, what the officers had no idea about, was that across town, her husband was just concluding an important meeting at City Hall. Mayor Williams was shaking hands with community leaders, smiling for photos, completely unaware that his wife was currently in the back of a police car, heading toward a storm that would shake their city to its core. The police car moved through traffic, each turn taking Tanya further from her son. She sat in the back seat, the handcuffs digging into her wrists whenever the car hit a bump. The partition between her and the officers muffled their conversation, but she could hear enough to know they were talking about lunch plans, not her case. Excuse me, Tanya said, her voice steadier than she felt. Can you please tell me exactly what I'm being taken in for? The taller officer glanced in the rearview mirror. Suspected theft, resisting arrest, and causing a public disturbance. Theft? I didn't take anything from anyone, Tanya said, leaning forward as much as the seatbelt allowed. And I wasn't causing any disturbance until you tried to handcuff me in front of my child. Ma'am, we're just responding to a call, the shorter officer replied, without turning around. You can explain everything at the station. Tanya leaned back against the seat, trying to control her breathing. She thought about her son, hoping that her friend from the park was taking good care of him. She knew she should be frightened, and she was, but mostly she felt a burning sense of injustice. Meanwhile, at the park, her friend Lisa had taken Tanya's son to a bench away from the crowd. Your mom is going to be okay, Lisa said, rubbing his back while he hiccuped through his tears. We're going to call your dad right now. Why did they take her? He sobbed, his small shoulders shaking. She didn't do anything bad. Lisa pulled out her phone. I know, sweetie. It's a mistake, and we're going to fix it. Do you know your dad's number? The boy nodded and recited the number through sniffles. Lisa dialed, her heart pounding as she waited for an answer. Across town, Mayor David Williams was wrapping up a meeting with the city council. His phone vibrated in his pocket, but he ignored it, focused on the budget discussion. It wasn't until the third call in a row that he excused himself and stepped into the hallway. This is David Williams, he answered, not recognizing the number. Mr. Williams, you don't know me. I'm Lisa Chen from Westlake Park. I'm with your son right now. Your wife has been arrested. The mayor's world stopped. What did you just say? The police took your wife away in handcuffs about 10 minutes ago. Your son is with me. He's very upset but physically okay. Mayor Williams gripped the phone tighter. Let me speak to him. When he heard his son's tearful voice, the mayor's professional composure cracked. Dad, they took Mom. She was just packing our stuff and they came and took her away. Listen to me, the mayor said, his voice low and urgent. I'm coming right now. Put Ms. Chen back on the phone. He thanked Lisa, got her contact information, and asked her to stay with his son until he arrived. Then he rushed back into the meeting room, grabbed his jacket, and leaned over to whisper to his assistant, Family emergency. Cancel everything. And call Chief Thompson. Tell him to meet me at the main precinct immediately. 20 minutes had passed since Tanya arrived at the police station. She sat on a hard bench in a processing area, still handcuffed, watching officers walk past as if she were invisible. No one had taken her statement. No one had read her rights. No one had offered her a phone call. Excuse me, she called to a passing officer. I need to make a call. My son is waiting for me. The officer barely looked at her. Processing will get to you when they get to you. Tanya closed her eyes and counted to 10. She knew the system well enough. Her husband had told her countless stories about how it worked and, more importantly, how it sometimes didn't work. Especially for people who looked like her. I have the right to make a phone call, she said firmly when another officer walked by. This one stopped, a young woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. Who brought you in? Officers Daniels and Reed, Tanya replied, reading the names from the report form they'd left on the desk. The female officer frowned. Let me see what's going on. She disappeared down a hallway, leaving Tanya alone again. Through a window, Tanya could see the sky beginning to darken. How long had she been here? 2 hours, 3? The female officer returned with an older man wearing a sergeant's badge. He looked at Tanya with tired eyes. Mrs. He consulted the clipboard in his hand. Williams, Tanya supplied. Tanya Williams. Mrs. Williams, I understand you haven't been processed yet. We're a bit backed up today. I need to make a phone call, Tanya repeated. My 8-year-old son saw me get arrested. He needs to hear my voice, the sergeant nodded. We'll get you to a phone. First, can you tell me what happened at the park? Tanya explained everything. The afternoon with her son, the officer's approach, their refusal to check with witnesses. As she spoke, she noticed the sergeant's expression changing subtly. And you say this happened at Westlake Park? Around 3 o'clock? He asked, making notes. Yes, there were at least a dozen witnesses. Several people were recording it on their phones. The sergeant exchanged a look with the female officer. Let me check something. Officer Parker will take you to make your call. As Officer Parker led Tanya to a phone on the wall, she removed one of her handcuffs, securing the other to a bar next to the phone. 5 minutes, Parker said, stepping back to give her some privacy. Tanya dialed Lisa's number, praying her friend was still with her son. Lisa answered immediately. Tanya, are you okay? I'm at the police station. They're still processing me. Is my son all right? Tanya's voice broke. He's fine. He's with your husband now. Tanya froze. David is there? Yes, he came right away. Well, I've never seen someone so angry and so controlled at the same time. He's making calls. He spoke to someone named Chief Thompson. Relief washed over Tanya, followed quickly by a new worry. If David was calling in the police chief, this was going to become very public. Very fast. Can I talk to my son? She asked. The sound of her boy's voice on the phone brought tears to her eyes. Mom, are you coming home now? Soon, baby. Dad's working on it. I need you to be brave for a little while longer, okay? Dad says the police made a mistake. He says they didn't know who you were. Tanya's grip on the phone tightened. It doesn't matter who I am, sweetheart. They shouldn't treat anyone this way. Her 5 minutes ended too quickly. As Officer Parker led her back to the bench, Tanya noticed increased activity in the station. Officers were moving faster, speaking in hushed tones. Something had changed. Across the room, the door burst open. Chief Thompson strode in, followed by Mayor Williams. The entire station seemed to freeze. Tanya had seen her husband in many modes: loving father, tired public servant, passionate community advocate. But she had never seen him like this. His face was carved from stone, his eyes scanning the room until they locked on her. "David," she said, rising to her feet. The mayor crossed the room in long strides, Chief Thompson right behind him. When he saw the handcuffs still on her wrist, something flashed across his face that made several officers step back. "Take that off," he said to no one in particular, his voice dangerously quiet. "Now," Officer Parker quickly unlocked the cuff. Tanya rubbed her wrist, noting the red marks where the metal had dug into her skin. "Are you hurt?" David asked, taking her hands gently. "No, just angry, and worried about our son. He's with my mother. She picked him up from Lisa." David turned to Chief Thompson. "I want to see the arresting officers now." The chief nodded to a nearby sergeant. "Bring Daniels and Reed to my office." As they walked toward the chief's office, Tanya could feel every eye in the station on them. Some looked confused, others embarrassed. A few looked afraid. Inside the office, David closed the door and finally pulled Tanya into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into her hair. So sorry." "It's not your fault," she said, holding him just as tightly. "It is. We've talked about this for years. How the system fails our community. How it could happen to anyone." He pulled back to look at her. "But I never thought—" A knock on the door interrupted them. Chief Thompson entered with Officers Daniels and Reed, who stopped short when they saw Tanya standing there with the mayor's arm around her waist. "Officers," Chief Thompson said, his voice like ice. "I believe you've already met Mrs. Williams. Allow me to formally introduce her. This is Tanya Williams, community pediatrician, volunteer at the East Side Youth Center and wife of Mayor David Williams." The blood drained from both officers' faces as understanding dawned. Officer Daniels spoke first. "Ma'am, there was no way for us to know." "To know what?" David cut in. "That she was married to me? Would you have treated her differently if you had known? Because that's exactly the problem, isn't it?" Tanya placed a hand on her husband's arm. "The problem is that they should have treated me, should treat everyone with the same respect, no matter who they are or who they're married to." Outside the office window, they could see news vans pulling up to the station. Someone had tipped off the media. The story was breaking. "This isn't over," David said quietly to the officers. "Not by a long shot." Tanya looked at her husband, then at the gathering media outside. She thought of her son, of the terror in his eyes as he watched her being taken away. She thought of all the mothers who didn't have a mayor for a husband who might still be sitting on that bench, handcuffed and unheard. "No," she agreed, her voice growing stronger. "It's just beginning." The drive home from the police station was tense and quiet. David gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Tanya stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. Neither spoke until they pulled into their driveway. "Are you ready for this?" David asked, nodding toward their house where lights blazed from every window. His mother's car was parked out front, and he'd mentioned that a few close friends had gathered to offer support. Tanya took a deep breath. "I just want to hold our son." The front door opened before they reached it. David's mother stood there, her face lined with worry. Behind her, Tanya could see their boy peering around. "'Tis grandmother's legs, Mom!" he cried, ducking past his grandmother and running straight into Tanya's arms. Tanya knelt down and caught him, holding him close as he buried his face in her neck. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here," she whispered, feeling his small body trembling against hers. "I was so scared," he said, his voice muffled. "Those police were mean to you." Tanya pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "I was scared too, but I'm okay now, and I'm not going anywhere." Inside, their living room had become a makeshift crisis center. Pastor Wilson from their church sat on the couch with his wife. Two city council members who were close friends with David paced by the window. Lisa, who had stayed with their son at the park, sat at the dining table with a cup of untouched tea. "Tanya," Pastor Wilson said, rising to his feet, "thank God you're home safely." The next hour passed in a blur of hugs, reassurances, and quiet conversations in corners. Their son refused to leave Tanya's side, clinging to her hand or sitting on her lap. David moved from group to group, his phone constantly buzzing with calls and messages. Eventually, David's mother took their exhausted son upstairs to bed, though he protested that he wanted to stay with his mom. "I'll be up to tuck you in 5 minutes," Tanya promised. "I just need to talk to Dad and our friends for a little bit." When he was safely upstairs, the adults gathered in the living room. The mood shifted from relief to something more focused, more determined. "The video is everywhere," Councilwoman Henderson said, holding up her phone. 3 different angles. "People are furious." "My phone hasn't stopped ringing," Pastor Wilson added. "The community wants answers. They want action." David sat beside Tanya on the couch, taking her hand in his. "The chief has placed both officers on administrative leave pending an investigation." "An investigation?" Lisa scoffed. "We all saw what happened. What's there to investigate?" "Process," David said, his jaw tight. "There's always process. What happens next?" Tanya asked quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken since the group had gathered. Everyone turned to look at her. In the sudden silence, they could hear the faint sounds of David's mother singing a lullaby upstairs. "That depends," David said carefully. "Partly on what you want to do." Tanya looked around the room at these people who cared about her, who were outraged on her behalf. She thought about how differently this might have gone if she weren't the mayor's wife. "I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else," she said. "I want those officers to understand what they did. Not just to me, but to our son, to our community." David nodded. "There will be pressure for me to handle this quietly. To accept the department's apology and move on. We can't let that happen," Councilwoman Henderson said firmly. "This isn't just about Tanya. It's about every black mother who's been mistreated by police while their children watched." "The media's already calling," Pastor Wilson said. "They want statements from both of you." Tanya closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of what was coming. When she opened them, her gaze was steady. "Then we'll give them statements. But first I need to check on our son." Upstairs, Tanya found her boy still awake, his eyes wide in the glow of his nightlight. David's mother slipped out of the room with a gentle pat on Tanya's shoulder. "I thought you'd be asleep by now," Tanya said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "I was scared you might go away again," he whispered. Tanya's heart broke a little. "I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight, not ever. I promise." He reached for her hand, his small fingers tracing the marks the handcuffs had left on her wrist. "Did those hurt?" Tanya considered lying, then decided against it. "A little, but I'm okay now. Dad was really angry. I heard him talking to Grandma. He said bad words. Despite everything," Tanya smiled. "Sometimes adults use bad words when they're very upset. But that doesn't mean it's okay for you to use them." He nodded solemnly. "Are those police going to get in trouble?" Tanya chose her words carefully. "What happened today wasn't right. When people do things that aren't right, there should be consequences. That's what Dad and I are working on." "Good," he said with the simple certainty of a child. "They should say sorry to you." "An apology would be nice," Tanya agreed. "Now it's very late. Close your eyes." She stayed until his breathing became deep and regular, then quietly made her way back downstairs. The group had moved to the dining room table, where a laptop displayed a draft statement. They all looked up when she entered. "He's asleep," she said, taking a seat next to David. "What have I missed?" "We're drafting a statement for tomorrow's press conference," David explained. "The chief wants to meet with us first thing in the morning." Tanya scanned the document on the screen. It was polished, professional, and completely sanitized. It spoke of unfortunate misunderstandings and opportunities for improved training. "No," she said firmly. "This isn't right." David looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "This statement. It's too careful, too political." Tanya pushed the laptop away. "It doesn't talk about what really happened. About how I felt sitting in that police car watching our son cry. About how many hours I sat in that station before anyone would let me make a phone call." The room fell silent. David took her hand. "Tanya, we have to be strategic about this. I'm still the mayor. I have to work with the police department. And I'm still a black woman who was handcuffed and taken away in front of her child for absolutely nothing," Tanya replied, her voice rising slightly. "If we smooth this over, if we make it sound like just a little mistake that can be fixed with some sensitivity training, then nothing will change." Lisa nodded in agreement. She's right, David. This is bigger than politics. Pastor Wilson leaned forward. What do you want to say, Tanya? Not as the mayor's wife, but as yourself? Tanya took a deep breath. I want to tell the truth about what happened to me and what happens to so many others who don't have the protection of a powerful husband. I want to talk about the look on our son's face when they put me in that car and how that memory will stay with him forever. I want those officers and everyone watching to understand that this isn't about protocols or procedures. It's about human dignity. David looked at his wife with a mixture of pride and concern. If we go that route, it's going to create a firestorm. The police union will push back. Some of my supporters will be uncomfortable. Then they should be uncomfortable, Tanya said simply. Change doesn't happen when people are comfortable. Around the table, heads nodded in agreement. Councilwoman Henderson closed the laptop. We need a new statement, one that tells the real story. For the next hour, they worked together, crafting words that captured the truth of what had happened that day. As they worked, Tanya's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Who's that? David asked, noticing her puzzled expression. Tanya showed him the screen. The message read, Mrs. Williams, you don't know me. I'm Officer Parker from the station today. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how you were treated. It happens all the time and no one ever hears about it. Thank you for speaking up. David read it twice. Are you going to respond? Tanya thought for a moment, then typed, Thank you for reaching out. This isn't just about me. Would you be willing to talk more about what you've seen? The reply came almost immediately. Yes, there are others who feel the same way. Tanya looked up at the people gathered around her table, friends, allies, community leaders. For the first time since those handcuffs had clicked around her wrists, she felt something beyond anger and fear. She felt hope. I think, she said slowly, this might be bigger than we realized. Outside, news vans had begun to gather at the end of their driveway. Neighbors stood on porches watching. Phones buzzed with alerts and updates. The story was spreading, growing, taking on a life of its own. In his bed upstairs, their son slept peacefully, unaware that his mother's ordeal had sparked what would soon become a movement. Unaware that tomorrow, when his parents stood before those cameras, they would not just be asking for an apology. They would be demanding change. And for the first time in a very long time, people would actually be listening. Morning arrived with a soft pink glow filtering through the bedroom curtains. Tanya had barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the previous day in an endless loop. Beside her, David stirred, reaching for her hand. Did you sleep at all? He asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. Not much, she admitted. I kept thinking about what we're about to do. They lay in silence for a moment, the weight of the day ahead pressing down on them. Downstairs they could hear movement. David's mother was already up, probably making breakfast. The press conference was scheduled for 9 o'clock on the steps of City Hall. We still have time to take a more measured approach, David said carefully. No one would blame you if you wanted to keep this more private. Tanya turned to face him. Would you have suggested that if this had happened to someone else? To any other black mother in this city? David held her gaze for a long moment, then shook his head. No, I would be demanding justice, demanding change. I'm just worried about you. About our son. I'm worried too, Tanya said softly. But I'm more worried about what message we send if we don't speak the whole truth. What lesson our boy learns if we don't stand up. A small knock interrupted them. Their son stood in the doorway, clutching his favorite stuffed bear. Can I come in? He asked hesitantly. Of course, buddy, David said, lifting the covers. The boy climbed into bed between his parents, snuggling close to Tanya. Are you still sad about yesterday? He asked, looking up at her with worried eyes. Tanya brushed his hair back from his forehead. I'm not sad anymore. I'm determined. Do you know what that means? He thought for a moment. Like when you really, really want to do something and nobody can stop you. That's exactly right, she smiled. Dad and I are going to talk to a lot of people today about what happened. We're going to try to make sure it doesn't happen to other families. Can I come too? He asked. Tanya and David exchanged looks over their son's head. Not today, buddy, David said gently. Grandma's going to take you to her house. There will be too many people and cameras where we're going. But I saw what happened too, the boy insisted. I could tell them the police were mean to Mom. Tanya's heart ached at his earnest desire to help. I know you did, and that was very brave. But part of being brave is also knowing when to step back, Today, the bravest thing you can do is to let Mom and Dad handle this part. He didn't look convinced, but nodded reluctantly. Will you tell them I said the police should say sorry? We definitely will, David promised. Breakfast was a subdued affair. David's mother fussed over them all, making pancakes shaped like stars that no one had much appetite for. 2 of David's staff members arrived early, bringing fresh clothes for the press conference and updates on the media coverage. It's the top story on every local channel, one aide reported. National outlets are picking it up too. And social media? Tanya asked, exploding. The hashtag Justice for Tanya is trending. People are sharing their own stories of police encounters. Tanya nodded, feeling the responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was no longer just a woman who had experienced something terrible. She was becoming a symbol, a focal point for years of community pain and frustration. As they prepared to leave, their son clung to Tanya, suddenly reluctant to stay with his grandmother. What if you don't come back? He whispered, his eyes filling with tears. Tanya knelt down to his level. I will always come back to you. Always. Dad and I just need to talk to some important people, and then we'll pick you up at Grandma's house. We'll have pizza for dinner, okay? Promise? I promise. The drive to City Hall was silent. David took the back streets to avoid the media vans that had camped out near their home. When they arrived, his chief of staff met them at a side entrance. It's packed out front, she reported. Every news outlet in the state, plus some national. The police chief is already here, waiting in your office, and... She hesitated. What is it? David asked. Officers Daniels and Reed are here too. With their union rep? Tanya felt her heart rate increase. She hadn't expected to face those officers again so soon. Are they part of the press conference? She asked. The chief of staff shook her head. No, they've requested a private meeting first. The chief thinks it might be productive. David looked at Tanya. It's your call. We don't have to meet with them. Tanya thought about it, then straightened her shoulders. No, I want to. I want to look them in the eye, away from the cameras. The mayor's office felt smaller than usual, crowded with tension. Chief Thompson stood when they entered, his face grave. The 2 officers sat stiffly on a couch, a third man in a suit beside them, presumably the union representative. Mayor, Mrs. Williams. The chief nodded. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. David guided Tanya to seats across from the officers. Let's be clear about something first. This meeting was not a condition for anything. My wife has graciously agreed to hear what you have to say, but we make no promises about changing our planned statements. The union rep leaned forward. We understand that, Mayor. Officers Daniels and Reed simply wanted an opportunity to express their... Let them speak for themselves, Tanya interrupted, her eyes fixed on the officers. Officer Daniels, the taller one, cleared his throat. Mrs. Williams, we wanted to apologize personally for what happened yesterday. Are you apologizing because I'm the mayor's wife? Tanya asked directly. Would you be sitting here if I wasn't? The officer shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, we were responding to a call about a suspicious person. We followed protocol. That's not what I asked, Tanya said, her voice steady. I asked if you would be apologizing to me if I were just an ordinary citizen. Officer Reed, the shorter one, spoke up. The truth is probably not. And that's part of the problem. His partner shot him a warning look, but Reed continued. We're trained to treat every situation as potentially dangerous. To protect ourselves first. Sometimes that means we don't see people, really see them when we're responding to calls. The union rep tried to interject, but Reed held up a hand. No, let me finish. Mrs. Williams, what happened to you was wrong. Not because of who your husband is, but because we didn't listen. We didn't check with other witnesses. We escalated a situation that didn't need to be escalated. The room fell silent. Tanya studied the young officer's face, surprised by his candor. Thank you for that honesty, she said finally, but an apology isn't enough. My son watched me being handcuffed and taken away. He was terrified. He's still terrified. How do we fix that? Officer Daniels looked down at his hands. I don't know if we can, ma'am. I have kids, too. If someone did that to their mother... He trailed off. Chief Thompson stepped forward. Mrs. Williams, Mayor, we're prepared to announce some immediate policy changes this morning. New protocols for responding to calls like this. Additional training requirements. A community oversight committee. We've heard promises before, Chief, David said. The community needs more than words on paper. I understand, the chief nodded. That's why I'm also prepared to accept full responsibility for the culture that allowed this to happen. If you call for my resignation today, I'll tender it immediately." Tanya looked at the chief in surprise. "Is that what you think this is about? Finding someone to blame, isn't it?" The chief asked. "No," Tanya said firmly. "This isn't about ending your career or theirs." She gestured to the officers. "It's about making real change. The kind that means another mother doesn't go through what I went through. Another child doesn't see what my son saw." She stood up, smoothing her skirt with steady hands. "I appreciate the apology. I appreciate the willingness to accept consequences. But what I want more is a commitment to be part of the solution. A real solution, not just policy tweaks and press releases." The chief looked at her with new respect. "What would that look like to you, Mrs. Williams?" "I'm not sure yet," Tanya admitted. "But I know it starts with truth. Complete truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it makes people in power look bad." She turned to the officers. "Are you willing to tell the truth today? The whole truth about what happened and why?" The officers exchanged glances. Officer Reed nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. I am." Officer Daniels hesitated, then nodded as well. "Yes." The union rep started to protest, but Tanya cut him off. "This isn't about protecting reputations anymore. It's about protecting our community. All of our community." David checked his watch. "It's time. The press is waiting." As they walked toward the door, Tanya's phone buzzed. A text from Officer Parker. "There are 6 of us now. Ready to talk when you are?" Tanya showed David the message. He raised his eyebrows. 6 officers willing to speak out?" "It's a start," Tanya said. They paused at the door. Through the windows, they could see the crowd gathered on the steps of City Hall. Reporters with microphones, community members with signs, police officers standing at a respectful distance. David took Tanya's hand. "Are you ready for this?" Tanya thought of her son, safely at his grandmother's house, waiting to hear that his mother had been brave today. She thought of Officer Parker and the others, taking their own risks to speak up. She thought of all the mothers who had never received an apology, whose children had never seen justice done. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." They stepped out into the bright morning light, facing the cameras together, ready to tell a story that needed to be heard, not just about one afternoon in a park, but about a system that needed to change. A system that could change if enough brave people demanded it. Behind them, the 2 officers and the police chief followed, their faces solemn with the weight of the truth they were about to tell. The steps of City Hall buzzed with voices and camera clicks as Tanya and David approached the microphones. Sunlight bounced off the marble columns behind them, casting their shadows long across the crowd. Tanya felt the weight of every eye upon her, reporters with their notepads poised, community members holding signs with her name, police officers watching from a distance. For a moment, the enormity of it all threatened to overwhelm her. Then she thought of her son's face that morning, asking if he could help tell people what happened. She straightened her shoulders and stepped forward. The crowd quieted as David raised a hand. "Good. Morning. Thank you all for coming. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. I'm not speaking to you today as the mayor, but as a husband and father who watched his family traumatized by an incident that should never have happened." He turned to Tanya, a silent gesture passing between them. This was her moment. "My name is Tanya Williams," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Yesterday afternoon, I was at Westlake Park with my 8-year-old son. We were getting ready to leave when 2 police officers approached me. They claimed someone had reported a suspicious person. That person was supposedly me." She recounted the events in simple, direct terms, the escalation, the handcuffs, the terror in her son's eyes as she was taken away. "I sat handcuffed at the police station for over 2 hours before anyone would let me call my family," she continued. "No one read me my rights. No one told me exactly what I was being charged with. No one checked my story with the witnesses at the park." Tanya paused, looking out over the silent crowd. "What happened to me happens to people in our community every day. The only difference is that my husband happens to be the mayor. The only reason we're all standing here is because of who I'm married to. And that is exactly the problem." A murmur ran through the crowd. Behind her, she could feel the police chief shift uncomfortably. "I'm not here to demand resignations or point fingers at individual officers," Tanya continued. "I'm here because my son asked me this morning if I was going to make sure the police said sorry, and I realized that an apology isn't enough. Not for me, not for him, and not for all the mothers who don't get press conferences when this happens to them. David stepped forward again. The police chief has agreed to implement immediate policy changes, which he'll outline shortly. But my wife and I believe this moment calls for something more significant than policy tweaks. Tanya nodded. Last night I received a message from an officer who witnessed how I was treated. This morning I learned that several others want to speak out about similar incidents they've seen. This isn't about a few bad officers. It's about a system that needs to change. She looked directly into the cameras. So today, I'm announcing the formation of the Community Justice Initiative. This won't be just another task force or study group. It will be a partnership between community members, reform-minded officers, and city officials with real power to implement change. A reporter called out from the crowd. Mrs. Williams, are you saying that police officers are willing to speak out against their colleagues? Before Tanya could answer, Officer Reed stepped forward to the microphone. The crowd buzzed with surprise. Yes, they are, he said, his voice slightly unsteady. I'm one of the officers who arrested Mrs. Williams yesterday, and I'm here to say publicly that we were wrong. He glanced at his partner, who nodded reluctantly. We escalated a situation that didn't need escalation. We didn't listen. We didn't check with witnesses. We acted on assumptions that, if I'm being honest, were likely influenced by unconscious bias. A hush fell over the crowd. It was rare, almost unheard of, for an officer to admit such things publicly. The union rep advised us not to speak today, Officer Reed continued. But I have kids too, and I can't look them in the eye if I'm not willing to tell the truth when I've done something wrong. Chief Thompson stepped forward next. As chief, I take full responsibility for the culture of my department. The incident with Mrs. Williams was not a one-time mistake, but a symptom of deeper issues that I have not addressed adequately. Today I'm announcing several immediate changes. He outlined new response protocols, training requirements, and the formation of a community oversight committee. But it was his final announcement that caused the biggest stir. Effective immediately, we will implement a pilot program where social workers will respond alongside officers to certain types of calls, the chief said, and we will be reviewing our entire approach to community policing with input from the Community Justice Initiative that Mrs. Williams just announced. As the press conference continued, Tanya noticed a small group gathering at the edge of the crowd. 6 police officers in civilian clothes, standing together with solemn faces. Officer Parker was among them, giving Tanya a small nod of encouragement. The whistleblowers ready to come forward. After answering questions for nearly an hour, Tanya and David prepared to leave. As they stepped away from the microphones, a reporter called out one final question. Mrs. Williams, what do you say to people who think you're getting special treatment because you're the mayor's wife? Tanya turned back. I'd say they're absolutely right. I am getting special treatment. That's exactly why I'm standing here instead of still sitting in a cell. That's exactly why these cameras are here. And that's exactly why we need change. So that justice doesn't depend on who you're married to. The crowd erupted in applause as they walked back into City Hall. Later that afternoon, Tanya and David picked up their son from his grandmother's house as promised. He ran to them as soon as they arrived, throwing his arms around Tanya's legs. Did you do it? Did you tell them the police were mean? He asked eagerly. Tanya knelt down to his level. Yes, we did. And guess what? The police said they were sorry, just like you wanted. Did they promise not to do it again? To anyone? David ruffled his son's hair. They're going to try very hard not to, and Mom is going to help make sure of that. How? The boy asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Tanya smiled. Well, remember how you wanted to help tell people what happened? There's going to be lots of ways for everyone to help, even kids. We're starting something called the Community Justice Initiative, and we're going to need everyone's ideas. Can I come next time you talk to the people with cameras? He asked hopefully. Tanya and David exchanged looks. Maybe sometimes, Tanya said carefully, but a lot of this work isn't very exciting. It's mostly grown-ups talking in rooms for a long time. The boy considered this. But it's important, right? Very important, David nodded. Then I want to help, the boy declared. I can tell kids at my school what happened. Ms. Chen says that's called raising awareness. Despite the emotional exhaustion of the day, Tanya laughed. Ms. Chen is right, and that would be very helpful. That evening, they had pizza for dinner as promised. As they ate, Tanya's phone buzzed constantly with messages. Community leaders offering support, other mothers sharing similar stories, reporters requesting interviews. The hashtag Justice for Tanya had evolved into Justice for All. The conversation was growing, spreading, taking on a life of its own. After their son was in bed, Tanya and David sat on the back porch, sharing a rare quiet moment. "You know this is just the beginning, right?" David said softly. "There will be pushback, budget fights, people who say we're going too far, too fast." "I know," Tanya nodded. "I'm ready for that. The election is next year." "This could affect—" "Don't," Tanya interrupted gently. "Don't make this about politics. It's too important for that." David took her hand. "You're right. I just want you to be prepared. This won't be easy." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Tanya replied, gazing up at the stars. "But I keep thinking about our son and all the children like him. They're watching us. They're learning from how we respond to injustice, whether we accept it or stand against it." From inside the house came the soft chime of a text message. Tanya checked her phone to find a message from Officer Parker. "First meeting set for tomorrow. 15 officers now. This is really happening." Tanya showed the message to David. His eyebrows rose in surprise. 15? That's significant. "It's a start," Tanya said. "A seed of change." 6 months later, Tanya stood at those same City Hall steps, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood community leaders, reformed-minded officers, and ordinary citizens who had joined the Community Justice Initiative. Behind her, their son held a small sign he had made himself. "Listen to everyone." The pilot program pairing social workers with police had shown promising results. Complaints against officers were down. Community trust was slowly rebuilding. There was still so much work to do, so many challenges ahead. But standing there in the autumn sunshine, Tanya felt something that had been missing that day in the park: hope. As she stepped up to the microphones to share the initiative's first progress report, Tanya caught her son's eye. He gave her a thumbs up and a gap-toothed grin. This was why she had refused to stay silent. This was why she had pushed for truth rather than a quick apology. Not just for justice in the moment, but for a better world for all children, those with powerful parents, and those without. The handcuffs that had once left marks on her wrists had become the catalyst for change that many had thought impossible. Sometimes, Tanya reflected as she began to speak, the most painful moments contained the seeds of the most important transformations. And in that transformation, there was healing, not just for her family, but for an entire community.